Welcome to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, you are having a great end to your Tuesday. Unfortunately, without Braves baseball, but a good start to your Wednesday as well. Of course, a lot of things going on when it comes to the Braves, so nobody better to talk with than one of the best when it comes to covering the Braves for many years now, Scott Coleman. Scott, a pleasure to talk with you again, sir. Hope you've been well.
Hey, Shawn, great to be on with you tonight. And yeah, rain or shine, the Hammer Territory podcast goes on. And I know it's a bummer to not get the game in on Tuesday night, but the Braves are about to kick off a stretch where they play 3 games in 30 hours. It's going to be pretty crazy. It's going to be a lot of baseball in a very short time period. Let's hope that the Braves can go out there and take advantage of a doubleheader on Wednesday and then try to beat up on a pretty bad White Sox team on Thursday.
Absolutely. And so we will have all the details for you covered in this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast. Of course, part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts, and some very exciting news when it comes to Foul Territory. Foul Territory itself, the show will now be on Bally Sports Network. Make sure to check your local listings and also social media for when the show will be airing. But that's not the only exciting thing concerning the Braves and Foul Territory. Scott, there was a pretty fun segment today with Ken Rosenthal concerning the Braves. Want to tell everybody a bit more about that?
Yeah, so a really great segment on the show today with Ken Rosenthal, who was with the Braves in New York over the weekend. And Rosenthal sat down and talked with Charlie Morton quite a bit. And take away what Charlie Morton does on the field. Off the field, you will not find a single person who says a bad word about Charlie. By everyone's accounts, an A-plus human being, an individual. And Ken had some really insightful information from a conversation he had with Charlie about his future, missing his kids and his wife, and the strain that being away for 6 months can put on his family. It's really some good stuff. We're going to play the clip here for you.
Finally, Ken Rosenthal is writing about how Eeyore, as I like to call him, is like, well, I just don't know what kind of pitcher I am. Do you feel like this is something new from Chuck, or do you feel like this is like, this really is the end for Charlie Morton?
I sensed in this conversation that I had with him on Friday more that is coming to the end than in the past. And he's talked about retirement for the past several years. He's 40 years old. He's going to talk about retirement. But he talked about being away from his kids. And I do think, though he didn't quite say this outwardly, he seems frustrated with how it's going. His ERA is in the low 4s. He's doing fine. But he talked about not knowing what his identity is right now. His velo's down. It's not what it was a couple of years ago. Still has a great curveball, but there are times he tries to go more slider cutter because he's not confident in the north-south stuff. He wants the east-west stuff. He's going on and on. And that's Charlie, and that's why guys like me really enjoy talking to him because, as I wrote, he'll offer you a window into his soul. But yes, I do believe he is getting close to the end now. He misses his kids. He's got 4 kids. He wants to see them grow up. He talked about, I didn't quote him on this, but he did talk about how his wife is burdened and he's off running around playing baseball. So he's had an amazing career, one of the great, interesting careers of this generation. The fact that it really all happened for him after 30, but he is, at least at this point, seeing somewhat of a finish line in sight.
Of course, amazing insight from Charlie Morton, as always. I can tell you this, Scott, it's always fun. You don't necessarily always know where his answer is going to go, but at the end of it, it always seems like he's got great insight. Once again, he put that on display in that segment with Ken Rosenthal.
Yeah, and Charlie has talked about retiring for a couple of years now. But obviously, whenever somebody wants to throw a $20 million paycheck at you, that probably sways some things. And I think Charlie would be the first one to tell you that when it's his time, he's going to call it quits. He's had an incredible career, a career of 20 years now professionally. I think the craziest stat is he was coming up when Jeff Francoeur and Brian McCann were getting drafted. It's been a very long and successful career for Charlie. I would imagine that this is his final year. It seemed like he was truly 50-50 after last year and, of course, decided to come back So I would guess this is probably the last year for Charlie Morton in the major leagues. It's been a hell of a career, and hopefully he can find some stability and consistency in the rotation because, as Ken reported, it sounds like Charlie has been pretty frustrated with his performance lately. He doesn't have command. His velocity has been down a little bit. His fastball is down about a mile an hour from last year. So clearly, it has not been a perfect start to the campaign for Charlie. But he, of course, is a veteran, and let's hope that he's able to settle in over these summer months and really provide a little bit more of a stabilizing force behind the big three in the rotation.
Absolutely. For those who want to know just how long it's been since, Charlie Morton has been in the majors, he actually, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, he actually, if I remember correctly, he was the prize acquisition of the Pirates in the Nate McLouth trade that we did, I believe, back in either 2008 or 2009, went
Yeah.
from the Braves to the Pirates in that trade. But if we want to talk about consistency when it comes to the Braves rotation, Scott, they're right now, that is what they're hoping for above all else. Because as we mentioned to start off the show, 3 games in 30 hours due to the rainout on Tuesday. Here's how the Braves schedules will look as they end this road trip. 12:45 p.m. Central on Wednesday. They will face off against the Cardinals. Ronaldo Lopez will be on the mound for the Braves. And then in his return to the majors, Bryce Elder will actually start game 2, which will start at 6:15 p.m. And then the Braves will then have to go to Chicago on Thursday to make up a game that had been, I believe, one of their first 5 games of the season that had been rained out. They're going to have to make up that game on Thursday, and Chris Sale will be making his return to Chicago. Now, I'm sure he's pitched in Chicago for the Red Sox before. I don't know that off the top of my head, but he'll be on the mound in Chicago versus the White Sox, I believe, at 3 p.m. on Thursday. But Scott, it's good to hear some of those names that are going to be on the mound, but that is a very, very tall task for this Braves team that already is kind of trying to maneuver some different, bodies into different positions. The status of Orlando Arcia up in the air. But the big thing is that the Braves are going to have 3 games in 30 hours. You certainly are glad that you have these arms on the mound, but this is going to be a tall, tall task, especially for the Braves pitching staff.
Yeah, it's a lot. They're really going to have to lean on these guys to work deep into the game, especially. And looking at the pitching matchups, you're going to have Ronaldo Lopez against Kyle Gibson in game 1. Oh, Gibson's a veteran for St. Louis. He was with Baltimore for many years. This should be a good pitching matchup. Let's hope that Ronaldo can keep it going. And then when the Braves announced that Bryce Elder was going to make the start on Wednesday night, it actually sounds like that was going to be the plan regardless of the rainout doubleheader. They were going to call up Bryce for Wednesday and then push everybody else back a day, which we, of course, know they're looking to do every time they get the opportunity. I think whenever Bryce pitches, everybody holds their breath a little bit. He's coming off a not very good start with Gwinnett, but before that, he was pitching really well, a lot of strikeouts and not many walks. And then for Chris Sale on Thursday, I am sure there'll be a lot of emotion. He came over from the White Sox to Boston in 2017, I believe. So a lot of time has passed, but of course came up with Chicago. So it'll be cool for him to be back in his old stomping grounds. But let's hope, especially with Ronaldo and Chris Sale on the mound, the Braves can take at least 2 of these games in the next 30 hours or so, and then get on home for a long homestand, which I am sure everybody is looking forward to.
Absolutely. And I can tell you this, while it's going to be a very interesting 30 hours, the good thing is that the Braves are going to be able to have a long homestand after that. And Scott, I can tell you this, you're someone that has, recently, traveled, quite a bit yourself, but I know that you enjoy seeing the Braves whenever you can. But whether it's at home or it's away, the one place for you to be able to trust when it comes to getting your tickets for the Braves is SeatGeek.
That's right. I am actually going to be at a couple of the Braves games in Phoenix in a couple of weeks when they come out to play the Diamondbacks. I'm going to be using SeatGeek. If you use the promo code HAMMER, you can save $20 off your first order. So be sure to take advantage of that offer.
Absolutely. 28 million downloads, 70,000 different opportunities, whether it's sports games, festivals, whatever you may enjoy. SeatGeek is the place to have you covered. And it's baseball's #1 source for tickets. And the great thing about it is that it's got you covered in terms of letting you know the quality of the tickets. On a scale from 1 to 10, it'll rank the tickets. Green means good, red means not so good. Make sure you check out that ranking system to know how good the tickets that you are getting are going to be for you. Listen, the Braves are certainly going to have to go through a lot of different changes over the next 30 hours to make sure that they are going to have a successful into their road trip. Well, one change that you can make to your day to ensure that your nutrition stays as successful as possible is including AG1 supplement.
Eric Kratz here from FT. I'm a former athlete that really pays attention to his routine. And AG1 every morning before my workouts is something that gets my day going.
Hey, Braun here. AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that delivers daily nutrients and gut health support, and it's backed by multiple research studies so you can trust what you're putting in your body.
Unlike other products which only test their ingredients in isolation, AG1 tests their formula as a whole.
Ready for this stat? 97% of people in a research study felt more energy after 30 days of drinking AG1. If I had to recommend one product to support whole body health, it's AG1, and that's why FT is excited to have them as a new partner. Starting your journey with AG1 is a win. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/foul. That's drinkag1.com/FOUL. Go check it out, FT fam.
So, Scott, obviously the Braves are going to be facing, I don't want to say turmoil, but, a lot's going to be going on over the next 30 hours. But I want to take a bit of a step back, and I know you and Brad have done this as well, but I don't want to get too much into what y'all have already discussed. But I do want to say, when it comes to this Braves team, I definitely think that over the next 30 hours, you hope to get 2 of these 3 games. But the one big thing is that you're really hoping that this Braves team doesn't allow for this unexpected rain delay and now this, area of chaos in their schedule. You don't want it to ruin the momentum of just how good they've been playing, especially when it comes to how good the top of the order has been producing now with Jared Kelenic at the top of the lineup.
Yeah, I know it's not ideal, to be sure. It's a lot of baseball in a short amount of time. Thankfully, the flight from St. Louis to Chicago is maybe an hour, so it's not like they have to cross the country and then cross back. But it's the Braves have been playing well. They won 8 out of 10. They should have won Monday night's game, just ran into some bad luck, and they were really a swing away, and really they were a couple of feet away from that game becoming a totally different ball game. But at the end of the day, you can't make excuses. And the Cardinals are dealing with the exact same kind of scheduling. Doubleheaders are never easy. But you have to hope the Braves keep rolling the way they've been rolling. And, we talked about the pitching matchups. They have an opportunity to really just take advantage of every time Sale and Lopez are on the mound. They've given the Braves a chance to win just about every time they've gone out there. Let's hope the offense continues to hit the way it has, especially before Monday night. It was encouraging that the offense really kind of fought back in the last 2 innings, put a bunch of runners on base. Ozzie Albies just missed a game-tying home run on Monday that would have been a lot of fun and would have made things interesting. And then that 9th inning rally, even if they came up a run short, it was very much on par with what we've come to expect from the Braves in recent years, where maybe they weren't playing well for 6 or 7 innings, but they just find a way to make things interesting late and kind of give you a fight, even if you aren't going to ultimately win the game.
Absolutely. And the great thing is that you have a bit more confidence. Austin Riley talked about it, again, after Monday's game, even with the fact that they lost, the Braves definitely felt as if they were in the right position. They did, and the underlying metrics showed it that their approach at the plate certainly just seemed to lead to better results, but it just did not work out. But of course, Scott, the other, less than positive news from Monday was that left-hander Ray Kerr, who had shown very good flashes, both the starting rotation as well as a reliever. He was an underrated, part of the off-season bevy of moves that Alex Anthopoulos made. He unfortunately is the latest Brave that's going to go undergo Tommy John surgery. And we've seen others that have gone this. Spencer Strider, Owen Murphy. It's crazy just the amount of pitchers all across baseball who were undergoing these the Tommy John surgery, but. For the Braves, while that is certainly negative injury news, we also are starting to see a bit of positive injury news. AJ Minter seems to be working his way back, and Ian Anderson seems to be, starting to, put, some, innings together. I don't necessarily know if he's anybody that they need to rely on, maybe until, August or later. But the thing that I will ask is this, we're getting a month closer to the trade deadline. I think the Braves are perfectly fine if, Sale and Lopez and Fried and Morton are healthy. I think you're fine with that rotation going into the playoffs if they're healthy. But does it appear to be, with all the injuries that the Braves have undergone through their pitching staff? I know that they have a deep bullpen. Do you think another arm that they could trust for multiple innings in the playoffs, does that become a bit more of a priority as we get closer to the deadline? Or do you think they just need to stick with maybe just going with the usual, find a reliever who could do better in Atlanta route instead of just a multi-inning guy?
I'm sure that Alex Anthopoulos is going to look under every single rock to try to find pitching staff help ahead of the trade deadline, whether that's in the rotation or in the bullpen. The bullpen is an area that he has addressed basically every year since he took over the job. And while he hasn't made necessarily a big splash in the rotation, because usually the prices are really inflated and you have to give up quite a bit of prospect capital, he may feel the need to push in a couple of chips depending on how the next 5 or 6 weeks go ahead of the deadline. So we will see. It's going to be a big challenge for Anthopoulos. Of course, he's going to have to look presumably for an outfielder. Brad and I talked at length on the Sunday evening show about shortstop and potentially addressing that position. And then everybody in baseball who's trying to make the playoffs is looking for pitching help come July. It's going to be a really busy couple of weeks, and let's hope he's able to make some impact additions. And on Ray Kerr, really a bummer. Yeah, I know that I didn't love how the Braves used Kerr. I didn't like how they were having him make starts suddenly when he's really never been a starter. He was exclusively a reliever with the Padres last year, was basically a reliever through the first 2 months of the season. And then out of the blue, they start making him a starter, and the results were not good. And maybe he was not necessarily super effective out of the bullpen, but he has good stuff. He throws hard. He gets a lot of swing and miss. And now Kerr is going to miss not only all of this year, but probably most, if not all, of next season as well, as he recovers from Tommy John. So really a bummer for Kerr. It has been a brutal year across Major League Baseball for elbow injuries. And sadly, he is just yet another one added to that tally.
And Scott, I know that Ray Kerr probably wasn't just too big into the plans of the Braves, beyond this year, but I think that this is something that definitely, kind of, because, Hurst and Waldrop, we're still waiting to hear, him getting going back. AJ Smith-Shawver, getting going back eventually, though his is an oblique injury. The thing that I'm getting at, and most importantly, obviously, Spencer Strider, we already were talking about the Braves beyond this year, having to, we talked about Charlie Morton at the beginning of the show, having to fill 2 rotation spots if Morton retires and Fried likely goes off in free agency. Well, you were thinking maybe with some of the younger talents in the Braves system, maybe they could use some of that depth finally in the rotation. But with Strider coming back from injury, others coming back from injury as well, it's not just about you filling those spots. Now it's you also having to consider, hey, we're dealing with some injuries as well. It just once again goes to show how at times unreliable and brutal, if you have to rely on your internal pitching, how brutal that strategy can be. It's never what you think it's going to be, even a year in the future.
Yeah, starting pitching is very much a year-to-year proposition. You think about the Braves even just a couple of seasons ago, you think about Ian Anderson, you think about Kyle Wright, you think about Michael Soroka, Touki Toussaint, Shawn Newcomb, you go down the list. All of those arms look like they could potentially be long-term fixtures for the Braves. And what happened, right? Injuries, underperformance, guys are out of the league, guys are no longer with the team. It's a brutal game, not only finding capable, talented starting pitching talent, but then keeping them healthy is so difficult with this rush of elbow and shoulder injuries that we have seen. So obviously it is a lengthy conversation for another day, what Alex is going to do and what the 2025 rotation might look like. But that is a consideration to be sure come trade deadline time, knowing that Max Fried is about to become a very rich man, and maybe it's not with the Braves. And if Charlie Morton hangs him up, and you have Spencer Strider coming back from elbow surgery, and you have Chris Sale and Ronaldo Lopez, who are just as susceptible to an injury as anybody else in the major leagues, there are a lot of questions on the horizon, and maybe we'll start to get a little bit of clarity here ahead of the trade deadline.
Don't mean to be, turn this into, a potential what could be in terms of a negative sense, but definitely just just certainly hoping that the injury bug, Lady Luck, finally shines down us instead of the injury bug, and we'll get a stretch here to where the Braves will actually be able, to rely on their best talents without having to worry about health being an issue. But Scott, I know that there's plenty to look forward to. And the other thing is that we turn right around after this 30 hours of chaos. We turn right around and potentially, I don't necessarily know what the schedule is like yet for the Pittsburgh-Atlanta series this weekend, but Braves fans are going to have a great opportunity because I believe they're definitely going to see Paul Skeens in Atlanta. They may even be able to see Jared Jones. But talk a bit about that, but also what they have to look forward to when it comes to the rest of this week on the Hammer Territory podcast.
Yeah, if you have tickets, I believe on Saturday night is going to be Paul Skeens in Atlanta. It is going to be electric. He is, of course, the number 1 overall pick from last summer's draft, hitting 102 miles an hour with his fastball. So if you have tickets, enjoy. If you don't have tickets, maybe take a look at SeatGeek and use that code HAMMER and try to get some discounted tickets because it should be a lot of fun. The Pirates are not a bad team. They're okay. They're below 500, but they are not the 105 lost Pirates of a couple years ago. So we've talked about on the show now for a couple of weeks that if the Braves are really going to get back to their winning ways and push to get back into the division race, and even if they can't take over the East, really pad that wild card lead, they have to take advantage of the lesser teams whenever they get the opportunity. I would say that Pittsburgh is a lesser team, even if they have a couple of really good starting pitchers. But I'm sure that after 3 road games in 30 hours and going from St. Louis to Chicago to Atlanta in a very short amount of time, the boys will be happy to be back home, and it should be a really good weekend series at Truist.
Absolutely. And Scott and the rest of us are going to have you all covered, and also some surprise but special guest appearances later on this week when it comes to the Hammer Territory podcast. Again, part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts. And of course, you can now check out Foul Territory itself on Bally Sports Network. Make sure you check your local listings and across social media for the times that it will be available. But Scott, a bit of a shortened version of the show tonight. No game to talk about, but always a pleasure to do this with you. Good that you're doing well. Anything else before we close out the show for tonight?
Yeah, I'm glad we could squeeze one in, Shawn. We were going to talk about a game tonight, and of course, Mother Nature had other ideas. I guess it got really nasty in St. Louis tonight with heavy rain and even some hail. So nobody wants to stick around and try to play through that. But we will be back with plenty of shows throughout the week. Big thank you to everybody who has checked us out and for all the ratings and reviews. We'll be back soon, and always a good time to do one of these with you, Shawn.
Go Braves. We'll talk to you again soon. For Scott Coleman, my name's Shawn Coleman. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.